Sup, it's Greggatron. Happy Saturday. Hope everybody's having a good weekend, and I hope you like my shirt. Yeah. There we go. So I got an interesting topic I've been thinking about off and on for some time now. Do you guys think somebody should be a hero? Speaking of my shirt. Not me in particular, but just generally speaking, do you think people should be a hero? And by a hero, I mean when you see a quote-unquote person in trouble or an innocent bystander or whatever getting beat or picked on or what have you, do you think you as an individual or somebody close by should step in and stop it? That's what I mean by be a hero. Now, there's a lot that goes into this. This video could go in any direction, but honestly, I can't answer yes or no. So therefore, I'm just going to say both, and here's why. I'll say no in the sense that yes, you should mind your own business. And you shouldn't get involved in the sense that you can make it worse, or you can make it to where now you're in trouble. You can make it to where you have a lawsuit now against you. You might end up in the hospital or worse. You could end up in a coma or dead or anything. And the person you think you're protecting might not have wanted to be protected. And then the person who is quote unquote bullying or attacking that person, now you could have made an enemy against that person. See what I'm saying? A lot goes into it. So, and I'll dig into that later. So no for that reason. But I say yes at the same time because I do think people should quote unquote stand up and help one another, because we live in a society today that sounds so generic. We live in a world today where criminals are getting comfortable being criminals and scum of the earth, and they only do this stuff because they know they'll get away with it. So if I'm a scumbag who goes around being a public menace, and I know the cops ain't gonna stop me, the law-abiding citizens ain't gonna stop me, I'm just gonna keep doing that. You know what I'm saying? I'm gonna continue my wrath of being a public menace. So that's why I say yes, we should stand up and quote unquote, and I don't want to use the word fight because in my last video I was talking about how wrong violence is. But when I say stand up for people, I just mean either verbally you're like, hey, knock it off, or hey man, back up, leave this person alone. Or unfortunately, yes, you might have to physically say, hey man, or you might actually have to get the person off. Now, I'm not condoning violence in any way, shape, or form. But we live in the real world, and that's why I think this topic is so fascinating, because it's almost like I'm 50-50 on it. But let me go back to the no side real quick. So back when I worked security, I was working in the parking garage one time, and all of a sudden I hear this lady pretty much screaming Bloody Mary. Well, I'm supposed to stay in the toll booth. So I leave my little post, go over to where I hear the screaming, and there's this guy who's like towering over this woman. And she's on the ground, the sidewalk. And I jump in, I'm like, stop, knock it off, cut it out. And then the guy, he stops immediately. He thought that I was a cop, but I wasn't. I was dressed in a blue uniform, and I had a tie on, I remember. So automatically he gets spooked. Well, he runs off. I help her up. Some other guy pulls up in a truck and is like, hey, buddy, you did the right thing. I saw the whole thing. If you need an eyewitness, blah, 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 I got your back. But I'm just thinking, where was he at when she was getting her butt beat? Now, I didn't even know where this began, how it started. Anyway, I asked her, what was that all about? And she's like, oh, we were at the top of the hotel. And basically, there was a restaurant where I worked at the top floor. It started there. He claimed that she was flirting with his friend or somebody who was with them. And he was pissed off about that because he was insecure. So he's calling her a slut and a whore all the way up and down the sidewalk. About to beat her. I don't know if he got a couple licks in already, but she was on the ground. That's when I jumped in. Basically, it started at the hotel and it ended off the property. Well, I told my guy on duty, we need to, put this in the log. And he's like, no, why? You should have never even been there. You should have been in the toll booth. And I was like, right, but what was going on was wrong. I had to do something. He's like, no, you didn't. I was like, well, if this was your wife getting beat, wouldn't you want me to step in? And he's like, leave my wife out of this. I called the guy, my coworker that is. I said, you're a pussy. And then we exchanged words and then I walked out. Well, then my boss told me, hey, I think you were right. The only thing you did wrong was you called so-and-so a pussy. You can't go around calling people pussies, Greg. I was like, okay, I understand. I'm sorry, I'm wrong. Well, then fast forward, I told my brother about it. And he was like, why are you getting into these people's business? And I'm like, because it was the right thing to do. He's like, Greg, you do know now when they go home, he's going to beat her ass that much more. Basically, he's saying me intervening made everything worse. So that's why I say I understand that no, you should not get involved. But at the same time, if you don't get involved, you don't know how much worse it could have been. And you don't know how much worse it would have been if you do get involved. So that's why I say there's not a right answer and there's not a wrong answer either. Because I could have lost my job and then they're still... Oh, and another thing my brother says, they're just going to get right back together. So these people who are in these situations, many times they want to be in these situations. So that's why when I see stuff today that looks similar to that, I'm just like, clearly they're in a relationship. Clearly they've been doing this for a long time. This is their MO. I don't think she wants to be saved. And it's not just women. It's when I see a man fighting another man. And I don't like to see that either. Another story. I was at a bar once. Of course, it's a bar, right? And this guy was like, did you just call me a mother lover? To this other guy. And they're like about to fight. And I'm just like observing. Well, anyway, they're about to fight. And I step in, I'm like, whoa, fellas, what's going on? Calm down. What's going on here? Me trying to be a good Samaritan. And the guy who was mad was like, he just called me a mother lover. And I was like, what? I was like, hey man, did you call him a mother lover? He's like, yeah. And then I looked at the other guy who was offended by it. I was like, dude, who cares? I was like, people call me a mother lover all the time. And I've been called a lot worse than that. I'm like, who cares about mother lover? You're making it sound like... And then I looked at the other guy who said the word, and I was like, did you even mean that? And he's like, no. I was like, see, man, he didn't even mean it. You two need to shake hands. These are like grown adults. Anyway, they shook hands and hugged, and it was funny. But I just walked off, and I'm thinking, wow, I just stopped a fight. But to me, MFer, That's not even offensive anymore because we've been so untraumatized by that. Even teenagers say that now. When I was growing up, I used to think that like old school working men use that mother lover, but now everybody says that. So I'm like, why would you even be offended by that today? Anyway, my point is that's just another story where I intervened. But I say no, you shouldn't intervene because today people are crazy. And not every story ends so nicely like that one. Nowadays, people will stab you, they'll shoot you, they'll take you out. And most of the time, it's a misunderstanding. So just be careful. Because you just don't know. You know, there was a story on the Jesse Lee Peterson show weeks ago, maybe months ago. They were talking about this guy who saw this woman getting robbed or something like that. And this other guy who was an innocent bystander, he just kind of watched it and kept on backing up. I think he was recording, but he didn't intervene at all. He just watched the whole thing happen. Well, the conversation was that guy right or wrong to do that? And then half the crew said he was right. The other half said he was wrong. Something like that. He was right to do nothing because, in my opinion, he could have got himself killed. And he didn't know the whole scope of that situation. But he was wrong in the sense that had he not intervened, something bad could have happened. But that's just a what if. So we really shouldn't dictate our lives on what if. That's just another example. But my point is, you just have to play it by ear because every situation's different. You know what I'm saying? If you feel inclined to do something, be my guest. But you'll just have to deal with the consequences, which sucks, but that's just the world we live in. Like this whole thing with this Jordan Neely thing, with this guy in the train. Well, Jordan Neely was the homeless guy who was threatening people in New York on the subway. Well, then Daniel Penny, I always want to call him Penning for some reason. Well, anyway, you guys all know the story. The ex-Marine puts the homeless guy in a headlock or a chokehold to stop him from acting crazy and threatening people. Well, after that happened, well, the guy died, first of all. But after that happened, it was all over the media, and this guy was in and out of court for it. Probably had to pay a ton of lawyers. Well, this guy's whole name could have been, well, it was tarnished. Whether he was right or wrong, his name was dragged through the mud, through the media, you know, tire marks all over this guy, thrown under the bus just for doing what he thought was the right thing. Whereas, had he done nothing, we don't know. Something worse could have happened. So you're pretty much damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't. Now, I guess this guy, what's his name? Daniel Penny. He was released on all charges, or the charges were dropped. But still, whether they were dropped or not, whether he's innocent or guilty, people in society are still going to see him as the bad guy. You should have never done that. You should have let that man do what he was going to do. But he believed he was doing the right thing. And I think he said something like, in similar circumstances, he'd do it again. But, like, that's the type of dude I am. Like, I'm going to watch you act a fool. But if push comes to shove, I'm going to at least say something. But even if you say something, you need to be careful. Because if you're dealing with someone who's insane or on drugs, that person could perceive it as a threat. And that person could attack you. So you really just... Yes, you should mind your own business. But what are you to do in a world like that? Like when I was a kid, I always wanted to have big arms. I always wanted to be a superhero. I always wanted to be like a Dragon Ball Z character or something like that. Green Lantern, you name it. I always wanted to help people. So even to this day, when you see something, because we were raised to believe, treat others the way you want to be treated. Help your fellow man. If I see someone who doesn't have the means to defend or protect his or herself, shouldn't we be obligated to at least step in? No, I talked about how the fittest survive in this world months ago. Makoto Shishio from Rurouni Kenshin, he believed, and this is an anime, it's historical fiction, but anyway, the bad guy in the show, he believed that if you're so weak that you can't defend yourself, basically, you don't deserve to live. But in this world, I'm like, what about like the old ladies walking with a stroller or a cane? I'm not talking about me defending an able-bodied man from another able-bodied man. No. First of all, there's no such thing as a fair fight. I'm talking about just a person who's weak. Let's say you have a disability. You can't walk. You're old. You got bad bones. Whatever, right? And an able-bodied man like me is trying to rob that person or is trying to hurt that person. Situations like that, I do think able-bodied men should say, knock it off, give her purse back, or use physical force if necessary to at least restrain the person, hold them down till the cops get there. Or the people should gang up on the bad guy in a perfect world and like, quote unquote, stomp him into submission. But that's just not the world we live in, which sucks. Now, I took a sociology class at the community college I went to, and I was taught this term called the bystander effect. The bystander effect is when something's happening to someone and there's people around who see it, but they just assume somebody close by is going to call the cops. But they don't call the cops themselves because they just assume someone else is going to call. It's called the bystander effect. So, in instances like that, if something's so bad to where you know you need to call the cops, then you should call the cops. But if you know the cops won't get there in time, don't we have an obligation as like law-abiding citizens? I'm getting a phone call. I'll have to call this person back. But don't we have a duty to protect our fellow man meaning men and women? Because not everybody can protect themselves. Or like, let's say you have a skill where you know how to defend yourself, whether it be for your job or you were in the military or whatever. If you have the means to do something, to be a hero, shouldn't you be? Or no? because of how you'll be treated after the fact. It's an interesting conversation. Very fascinating stuff. So, I could go in different directions with this, but the bottom line is, it could go either way. Play it by ear. Be safe. Be smart. Don't expose yourself to where you could be in one of those predicaments. Like, don't be in an alley at nighttime type of thing. Don't walk your dog at 1 a.m. down a street where there's no street lights, which sucks because nowadays you just have to be safe. You really can't trust anybody. You know what I'm saying? Even cops are demonized in certain situations when they think they're doing the right thing. There was something else I wanted to say, but it slipped my mind. It was kind of good, too. It was pretty good. But yeah. What do you guys think? If you're out and about and you see an old woman's purse get snatched, would you A, call the police? Would you B, check on the old lady? Or would you C, chase the person down and try to get the license plates? Because I think society would be a better place if people helped out in that way. You know what I'm saying? That's just me. You know what I mean? Because wouldn't that make the world a better place? It's a shame that people like me have to be afraid of, well, what if this happens? What if that happens? What if I end up in jail? It shouldn't be like that. And we live in a kiss-up culture society to where the scumbag will actually get more justice than you. Where the scumbag will turn around and sue you for dealing with him in the right way. It's kind of like domestic violence, right? Just to throw this in there for a little bit. I've heard stories where a couple will be arguing or they'll get into it physically and the wife hit the husband first. And let's say the husband hit her back, or there's times where the husband never even hit her back. Yet, he still goes to jail, long story short. I think that's wrong. There's something really wrong with that. We shouldn't live in a culture where that's acceptable. Now, the man might have all kinds of scratches and bruises, but he'll still go to jail. We shouldn't live in a culture or we shouldn't participate in a culture where the scumbag gets better treatment than the hero. If you're a hero, you should be acknowledged as a hero. And these people who do these things, they're not doing it to be heroic. They're just doing it because something in them is saying, I gotta stop this. This needs to come to an end. I need to help this person. And the victim of these robberies or beatings or whatever, they're going to remember that you helped them. That's a story for their grandkids. Oh, it was 2008 and I was being attacked or I was being mugged and this person stepped in and helped me. Y'all don't understand. When you do this, it's a selfless act. You're putting your life on the line to be of service to someone else. That's why it sounds like I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth, because I am. You're doing a selfless act to defend and protect, but at the same time, you're putting yourself in mortal danger. So which one's right and which one's wrong. There is no right and there is no wrong. Again, just play it by ear. Women, carry pepper spray on you. Men, don't be too confrontational. If it can be avoided, avoid it. But if push comes to shove, just be mindful. Don't be an idiot. You know what I mean? I hope this made some sense. Because I've been in a lot of, not a lot, but I've seen situations personally. I might make a part 2 to this video because I have another story for you, which I actually told a long time ago. Ooh, it's so good. I think I'm going to save that for next time. It's been 26 minutes. But yeah, stay tuned for part 2. Ooh, it's so good. But I'll talk to you guys later. It's Greggatron. Peace.